And we are live with another episode of the Keeg Talks, but the Keeg Talks comics, because the writers and the actors are out there striking. The Keeg's not talking movies and TV. The Keeg is talking comics. We are talking Daredevil. The Keeg Talks Daredevil today. I'm your host, Dimithri Perera. And if you're watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show. Or you're listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. And if you're listening to the podcast and you can't see the guests, then let me introduce them. First up, we got Maggie, a.k.a. Vegan Super Kick. Maggie, what's up?
Not a lot. How are you?
I'm doing good. Normally I have you on Comic Talk, and you're talking comics, and you're always talking about Daredevil. So
I know, I won't shut up about Daredevil.
Now it's just an episode dedicated to Daredevil. So
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've timed out my speech for a good 2 hours. We're ready.
Okay, because in this episode, I want to talk about everything Daredevil. I want to talk about Matt Murdock himself, but then I want to talk about his friends. I want to talk about his family, his foes, storylines that you guys love, storylines that you guys hate, writers and artists, and recommended reading to anyone out there who is looking to get into Daredevil. We're going to talk about his history and all that stuff and see what we could do in 10 hours. In 10 hours. In 2 hours is what I meant. 2 hours. Don't get your hopes up, Maggie.
Okay.
2 hours is all we got.
I'll toss some pages away.
Yeah. But it's not just Maggie and I. We also got the long-awaited return of Brian Long himself, Captain Comic Rex. What's up, Brian?
Hey, very excited on this Batman day to be discussing Red Batman. Really looking forward to this. Very happy to be here.
I didn't think about all that. I didn't. Truth be told, I feel like as a longtime comic fan, I lose track of like the special days. Like Free Comic Book Day, I'm like, I'll deal with it when I get to it. You know, I don't remember when it is. It'll come around. Because I've lived literally every Free Comic Book Day. The first Free Comic Book Day was when the first Spider-Man movie came out.
Yes, we have been blessed to have gone through it all. We've lived through every Free Comic Book Day that there has been.
Yeah.
Though with Batman Day, I kind of feel about Batman Day the way some people feel about Valentine's Day, where it feels like it was a corporate invention and this isn't a real day that has any significance. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird about it like that.
But it's not like all of like the country goes out and like buys Batman themed chocolates and like proposes.
Maybe we should though.
Proposes to their love upside down, swinging from a gargoyle. You know?
Yeah. Avoids taking them to the movies for obvious reasons.
It's like no, the movie industry tanks on Batman Day.
The movie industry on that one day. Like,
yeah.
Nah, it's probably not.
Cinemark closes on Batman Day.
Yeah.
Out of respect for the Waynes.
That's funny. Yeah, Batman, Red Batman, gargoyles. Daredevil hangs out with a lot of gargoyles. He might be in my. Oh, he is in my background. There's a gargoyle like right there. Yeah. And so that kind of happens. If you hang out with gargoyles, you're essentially that's half of what Batman is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do you guys like Daredevil better than Batman?
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting question.
Maggie says automatically yes.
Brian needs more time to think about it.
Why don't you start with your take on that?
I just do. I don't know. Like I don't really have like an immediate reason for it. I just know that I do. I like Batman. I tolerate Batman. Dimithri knows this about me. I tolerate most men in the DC universe.
And in life.
And in life, 100%. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's something about Matt's heart to me, and I don't know, we'll get into that later, but like he feels a little bit more aware of his surroundings than Bruce Wayne sometimes does. You know what I mean? But I like Batman. Happy Batman Day. You know.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I feel
Daredevil,
like
you saying the
editorial demands Batman's perfection, whereas Marvel's editorial doesn't demand Matt Murdock's perfection because Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, is not a flagship character for Marvel. And
so you saying that, Maggie, makes me think.
Sorry,
like
you made one sec. I don't know what happened to my speaker. Sorry, one sec. Are you there?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. You guys can hear me, but then I couldn't hear you, and then I was like, okay. Sorry.
Maggie,
Brian.
your comment about him being more aware, I had a thought where I was like, I feel like Daredevil is the working man's Batman, right? Because Batman exists in a space of privilege, but because Daredevil, as you were saying, Dimithri, is never held up as a flagship character in the same way Batman is by DC or even Spider-Man is by Marvel, there is a level of creative freedom that I think a lot of writers and artists are given when they come onto that book. And Chip Zdarsky, in his newsletter that he put out just at the end of his recent Daredevil run, basically said so much word for word. And even though Batman has certainly been in many more comics than Daredevil, I think Daredevil has had more consistently high quality comics from run to run than Batman has.
Is that just because Batman has like 12 comics a month?
I mean, I think that's certainly a factor, but I almost feel like starting from like the 1980s, you have almost a consistent through line of like 2 to 3 decades of just excellent Daredevil comics with some like maybe like spots in the middle where things get a little wonky, but I don't think you can say the same thing for Batman. I don't think there are like decades long runs where you're like, these Batman comics are consistently always great. You get like really great bright spots, but I feel like Daredevil has throughout my lifetime pretty consistently been a solid comic that is important to the Marvel universe, whether people are aware of it or not.
I think it might.
And by Marvel Universe, I mean the company itself and its creative reputation.
Right. I mean, I do chalk it up a lot to like Daredevil never has more than one title on at a time. It really never does, right? Like, I'm trying to think of if there's ever a moment. Did Elektra have a Daredevil comic at the same time as Daredevil? Like
with
or no?
Yeah, with Chip, but it was like 3 issues or something, right? It was really short.
Yeah,
they were just
like
tie-ins.
Series they've done with her, but never like a full blown ongoing, as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys have any more thoughts about that? I'm trying to think of like, you say working man. Do you like, I know a lawyer is a job, right? But when I think working man, I think like blue collar. So like, but he is a lawyer in his like real life, you know?
But he also was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
No.
When I say working man, I mean like, yes, he is a lawyer, but he is also a person who has had to work for everything that he has, harder than most because of his disability.
And you got to think too, even if he's a lawyer, you have to look at the kind of people that he's representing and trying to help too. Like that's the working man. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
He's very for the people. And like a lot of what happens, I don't know whether it happened in like past Daredevil comics, but like in Daredevil media in the past like 15 years, let's just say, they do focus a lot on there are lawyers in their ivory towers, right? Yes. And then they showcase that versus Matt, who's on the ground. Yeah. And that's been like a big theme in the last, 15, 20 years? Did Brian Michael Bendis deal with that in his run?
I don't know. I don't think I read his run, to be completely honest with you.
I haven't either. Well, I've read like bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever been a portrayal of Daredevil where he was where like Nelson and Murdoch or any attorney office that he worked for was like a high-powered attorney's office. Right. They've always kind of been portrayed as like barely hanging on, but because they are running it more as, I don't want to say a charity, that's not a right word, but they often work is it pre bono or pro bono? That's the right word. Yeah. They're not expecting clients who have millions and millions of dollars or people to pay them up front. They're working for people who are at the end of their rope and the system is not going to do anything to help them, so they step in to help those people in need.
You brought up Foggy. and I want to talk about Foggy because he is. So me personally, I love superhero teams
Mhm.
more than solo superheroes. Though when it comes to DC, I like DC's solo heroes better than Marvel solo heroes. Um, and it mostly comes down to a solo hero needs a good supporting cast. And for me, a good
Absolutely.
Superman story does involve the Daily Planet and Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane. And if you invent a family for him, give him a family. That's the supporting cast as well. Batman supporting cast is sometimes treated not like a supporting cast. And so then Batman kind of can either, sink or swim depending on how you're treating a supporting cast. But like Daredevil being a solo hero has a very strong supporting cast in his best runs. I feel like they're if you have it like when he has a good strong supporting cast, his runs are better.
Mm.
Do you guys feel that way?
Yeah, I agree for sure.
I feel that, yeah, 100%, especially because when you look at something like the Mark Waid run, for example, I think the story in that one that has the most impact is the whole saga of Foggy realizing he has cancer and the arc that him and Matt go on together as friends. Part of what I think makes that such a good supporting cast is you can dramatically give them very interesting things to do. Since Foggy is also a lawyer, there's like great stories and conflict and drama you can get out of that. And Karen being part of that ecosystem too is so crucial. It creates a situation where you can't just push those characters to the side. I think what you were talking about, Dimitri, where like you got to have a good supporting cast. I think sometimes writers forget about the characters who don't have the superpowers. And when you have characters like Foggy or Karen who can get more involved in the law side of things, you can give them good dramatic conflicts that don't have to involve capes and tights and punching people.
Right.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say is like a lot of times I can't think of off the top of my head like another hero who has, I mean, like maybe Superman and like Jimmy Olsen, but like another hero who has friends that like are not superpowered people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they're just as important to his story as Batman and Robin or like, anything
Right.
like that. But
I think Spider-Man when he's written right, because
yeah,
like I love Spider-Man, but a lot of the time like writers will focus just on Spider-Man and his life will be like just like an obstacle that he has to get over, as opposed to
yeah,
another one of his responsibilities. Right? It's not just
Right.
it's like, oh great, I got an ant. Okay, like I'm out swinging, and like no, it's like okay, but what about his love of his Aunt May? I think that's super
yeah,
important. But like good writers will write a strong supporting cast for Spider-Man. Like back when Harry Osborn, MJ, and Gwen Stacy were all part of his supporting cast. Like Peter Parker has a lot of characters that were part of his supporting cast, and it made him better back then.
mm,
Matt always has Foggy, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Even when
pretty
he's not
much.
around, Foggy's like a huge motivator for him. You know what I mean?
Like what? Like what do you mean?
Like even when you don't see him, even if he's off doing his own thing, like Matt's always got at least Foggy's best interest in mind whenever
Yeah,
he's doing whatever he's doing. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I think Foggy is such a symbol of the life that Matt, I think to a degree, wishes he could have if he didn't also have the insane ninja abilities that he contains as Daredevil, right? I think there's an aspect of Foggy that's kind of like what Matt's life would have been or could have been if he hadn't also been burdened with these extraordinary abilities that he feels it is his duty to then use beyond just the confines of the law, right?
Yeah.
I think that's such a fascinating thing about Matt Murdock is that when you really like look at this character, all of the elements I think just deepen what makes him so interesting is that he does try to live his life according to laws, whether they are the laws of the legal system or the laws of Catholicism, right? The
mm,
religious tenets that he also has committed himself to. But he's also somebody who sees, for better or worse, the way that those laws can be limiting in the pursuit of true justice. And that's when he
Mhm.
says, like, oh, okay, I got to manipulate these things and break these things because I have powers beyond just my mind and capabilities as a lawyer.
Something that is very specific to Matt is his Catholicism. How much does it matter to you guys, let's just say, as readers?
To me, okay, I am not Catholic. I am not even really religious.
Mhm.
But, I'm a Kentucky girl. I was raised in the Bible Belt, and my papa was a Southern Baptist preacher. And when I read a character like Matt having these conversations with God, just in general, about how he should be, what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, it does remind me of like growing up and being like, hey man, like if you're out there, why did you do this? Or like, why does this happen? You know what I mean? So as someone who has like a religious background, especially such a strong religious background like that, uh I think it is important to me to kind of see somebody struggle. You don't really see a lot of other people in comics struggling that hard or having that kind of relationship with faith. And I think it's cool to see, even as someone who is not very religious myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you 100%, Maggie. And I think that what's really great about the way that they use his faith in the comics is it's a way to give a unique perspective on everything that goes on within the Marvel universe, right? We
Yeah.
talked about him being the people's hero, and because the Marvel universe exists in such an extraordinary world where you have literal gods that come to Earth and all these other things that happen, it always bothers me when people say, "Why would Daredevil still be a Catholic if he's like met Thor?" And it's like, no, 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 you don't understand. In the Marvel universe, everything happened. Like if Thor exists and if like Khonshu exists, then Jesus and God, that all must
Yeah.
also be
Right.
real, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the
Exactly.
beautiful tapestry of Marvel. It's like, no, every religion is correct and it all exists together in this menagerie.
Yeah.
And the fact that he, in the same way that like, for better or worse, Moon Knight is tied to Khonshu, I think Daredevil has that same connection to his own faith. Um, and I just like seeing, I think it is important, Dimitri, to kind of definitively answer your question, because I think that sometimes in Marvel, especially, so many of those characters are like super genius scientists. And it's nice having somebody who has a different perspective on things
Hmm.
to like look at the universe and share the perspective of somebody who isn't necessarily a brilliant scientist, but has a religious understanding of the world or a faith based understanding of the world. And also, I think it's just nice as someone who was raised Catholic and is kind of a lapsed Catholic at this point. It's nice to have somebody who uses the idea of faith for something that is objectively good,
Hmm.
rather than what I think often happens with religious belief, regardless of what sect of religion you're talking about in our modern society, which is often used to perpetuate bigotry and hate, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think his understanding of it, his interpretation of it, is a truer version of it because he uses it to help people first and foremost, rather
Hmm.
than to, make someone's life worse.
And he
Yeah.
doesn't think he's better, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Which um, it happens in real life, right? If your way
yeah,
is the only way, then your only way is the better way, and thus you're better. Um,
Yeah.
I equate their treatment of him and his Catholicism because I think they do not, pun intended, I guess, demonize his Catholicism. Um, too many demons in Daredevil mythos. Too many, if you ask me. But they treat it a lot like Kamala Khan and her religion
mm,
of Islam, right? Like,
Hmm.
except with Miss Marvel, they have to essentially teach American audiences specific things about that religion, but they do treat it in
Yeah.
the same way in the sense of like, hey, it's cool, guys. Like both sides, you know what I mean? Like they're not
right.
treating either religion badly. Uh, the rites of Catholicism and like those specific things, confessional and priests and whatnot, I think that's ingrained to American, if not American culture, then American pop culture, right?
Mhm.
It's like we all generally know that, but not so much what Kamala Khan has to deal with. So I think that's the big difference. But for the most part, they treat their religion not as a burden, right? It's not a negative thing. It's just part of their characters, which I think is nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of characters are, to me, in comics, a lot of them are like atheists, but not like, they don't say it out loud, but a lot of them are. Like, you know?
And it wouldn't be surprised, like, if Reed Richards was like, I don't believe in God. It's like, yeah, Reed Richards wouldn't believe in God. That makes total sense because
Reed Richards has seen too much.
Right. Right.
Or his just understanding of it is like, we in ancient times saw them as gods, but they are extra dimensional beings who are able to live forever, right? He would have his own scientific logic and reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
But it all ultimately comes down to somebody's perception of the world, right? Like,
Right.
this is a thing I often think about. Maybe this is getting too heady, but like, all of our understandings of the world, even based in science, they're ultimately just like our descriptions and understandings. These are words we created and invented. It's all subjective understanding when you get right down to it. And you can scientifically prove things, but like, it's all based on human understanding and human words and human creation and ideas. So all of it at the end of the day rests on interpretation to some degree.
Right.
But yeah, I think that what's interesting too, Dimithri, you talk about like it being a part of American culture now. We sometimes lose sight of the fact that at the turn of the 20th century, when so many Irish and Italian immigrants especially were first coming to America, those ethnic identities weren't always perceived as white in the same way, even earlier than that in the 1800s. So Daredevil's Catholicism and explicitly being from Hell's Kitchen, which was such a strong Irish community, that it did kind of make him distinct from your waspy Reed Richards types of the world,
or
right?
Tony
Who were
Stark.
like very, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And even though those characters were obviously created by Jewish creators, there's a specific, I think, ethnicity that they were going for with those characters versus, say, your Ben Grimms or your Matt Murdocks, who clearly have distinct identities that are different from those characters.
Yeah.
Was Daredevil Catholic? Was he Catholic from the beginning?
So
when did that happen?
The early, it's never made super explicit, but like you get into the 1970s and you start getting the idea that he's meant to be Catholic, and then Born Again is where it's like,
yeah,
oh, this guy is Catholic, like this is a serious part of the whole identity.
Is it Frank Miller?
Yeah, well, it's not Frank Miller who invented it, but he's the one who really leans into it. Some of the 70s Daredevil stuff, there's like references to him being like an Irish Catholic. But again, it's one of those things too, where like, if you were reading that in the 60s and you're like, oh, this is a redheaded guy from Hell's Kitchen, you're going to be like, oh, this is the son of Irish immigrants who's probably Catholic. Like, that's going to be the sort of signifier that tells you exactly what's going on there.
Right. It just like, I was thinking about like heroes. I feel like in comic books, again, there's so many layers to it, and obviously it's what editorial wants and whatever, but in this world of Marvel, heroes don't treat religion the way a lot of people in the real world treat religion. Like, heroes aren't going over to other heroes. Like, nobody's trying to convert Thor to the one to the one true Lord and Savior,
Right.
Like
maybe someone should write that story though. That would actually be hilarious.
Could you imagine?
Like, nobody tells, like, Reed Richards he is going to hell. Well, they do, but they don't say it's because he is whatever he believes in,
Yeah.
But like, there are characters like Ben Grimm who are written as Jewish, right? Like, he is Jewish, Ben Grimm. And so, like, that's kind of nice to see. But Ben, doesn't extol any negative virtues. like Kamala Khan, Matt Murdock, which is nice to be not like the real world, I guess. You know?
Yeah.
Right. You don't have any baggage being brought in of prejudices being thrown against them in the same way.
Right.
Right.
I would really love to see a story where someone like where you just have theologians who live in the Marvel universe have to contend with the fact that you actually have proof of gods that truly exist and how that changes people's perceptions. Like, would that erase bigotry, or would you start getting like literal power scaling debates in theological spaces where they're like, well, we all know Thor defeated Khonshu in that fight, ergo Thor must be stronger than all these pantheon gods or what have you.
Thor versus Jesus Christ.
Well, so do you guys read X-Men
Well, you
comics?
even have, I was just about to say, you have Exodus, who continues to claim that Jesus was the first mutant. And I feel like every time he says that, everybody's like, okay, guy, if you say so.
Yeah, because you, as a reader, you can read it as canon that Jesus was a mutant. Or you could read it as Exodus is saying Jesus is a mutant, doesn't mean Jesus was a mutant. You know? But like...
Print the legend, right?
Yeah. Because Exodus wasn't around... He started in the Crusades, right? So
right,
he wasn't
right.
around when Jesus was born. So he wasn't there firsthand to see.
Yes. Although, canonically, Thor and Ghost Rider were there when Jesus was born. Do you know about that story?
No, it was a Christmas story?
There's a Marvel team up. It's like a Marvel team up issue where like Thor and Ghost Rider time travel.
Yeah.
And they end up following the Star of David and they see the birth of Jesus.
I mean, but it's our present day Ghost Rider?
It was who's the first Ghost Rider?
Well, there's a lot. Wait, is this a recent book?
No. It's from like the 80s. It's from like the Bronze Age, the 70s or 80s.
So what are you saying? Who was the first Ghost Rider?
It was
Johnny Blaze?
Johnny Blaze, yes. It's Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider.
What I was going to say is, like, you know how, like, like, Avengers has set up that, like, a lot of those mantles have been, like, mantles throughout history, right? So, like, there's been multiple Ghost Riders.
Yes.
It would be cool to see a Ghost Rider on a camel.
Sick if one of the wise men was a Ghost Rider.
Can you? Oh, now I want to see a Ghost Rider on a camel because I think that would be so sick.
Keep that pitch in your back pocket. You never know when you're gonna get the chance to possibly use it.
You know, but like I forget what we're going for. But like, yeah, I think like Matt's Catholicism is important to the character, and a lot of stories do come out of it. Do you guys have favorite storylines?
Oh yeah.
We already know what mine is, so go ahead, Brian.
No, Maggie, what is yours? Because I don't think I know. I don't think I've ever heard you specifically talk about that.
I feel like that's a joke. I only talk about I love Zdarsky's run. It's definitely my favorite.
I mean, it's pretty great.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I think it's funny that we're doing this the same week that the new run started. I'd like to talk about that at some point. But the Zdarsky run is definitely my favorite, and as poorly as it probably has aged, I think that the Frank Miller run is super important to the character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%.
So
I honestly, compared to some other things Frank Miller has done, I don't think it has aged as poorly. You know what I mean? I think that's really him.
Sure.
No, I'm saying that with the caveat of it's been a minute since I've read it. I might go back and be like, ugh. But you know, I don't think it's any worse than like something that was published in the 80s of Marvel, and you'd be like, this hasn't like particularly aged well, but it's not a disaster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Who wrote
Welcome
Sorry, Back, Frank, by the way?
Garth Ennis?
The
The Punisher comic?
Yeah.
That was Garth Ennis.
Okay.
Yeah. I have that, but I could not tell you if ever. I mean, I guess I would know, but I have a ton of Garth Ennis Punisher, but
I hate Garth Ennis.
That's rough.
I do like Garth Ennis' Punisher. It's like
yeah.
I hate Garth Ennis with a passion. Like because this is just a side note. The Boys is garbage. It is trash. It is a dumpster fire. The Boys comic, not the show. The show is cool. I like the show. The show does something with it that the comics don't, which is make it smart. The show is still shock value, but it's smart. Garth Ennis on Boys is, I will actively recommend people away from that comic.
I don't think it. Maggie, I wanted to ask, because I feel like I'm starting to remember seeing a TikTok about this. Was Zdarsky your first time like reading a full-blown Daredevil run, or was there somebody before this and I'm confusing something that you said?
No. Zdarsky was for sure like my first modern run.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got into Daredevil through the TV show, and then just kind of jumped right into Frank Miller's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And from there kind of splintered out into like Elektra and Punisher and all that stuff like we were talking about. And then I just mentioned it enough to where people were like, hey, you should probably read the run that's going on right now. And it got brought up enough to where I was just like, okay, and just immediately fell in love with it. You know what I mean? Now is the time. Now that it's over is where I'm kind of like going back and reading like the Wade run and, earlier stuff. So, but it is, it was for sure my first like active read on the character.
What is it about it that makes it a definitive run for you?
I think that just seeing Matt so boots on the ground, like trying to help people, and also realizing that the system that he so deeply defended was actually incredibly flawed. And I know that there was a ton of like underlying themes about, like prison reform and like how it does or does not help people and all that stuff. But I think seeing Matt realize that the things he had put so much of his faith into were flawed and actually harmful, and trying to fix that, I think that was probably the reason why it was so important for me. Again, kind of going back to like his religion and stuff, because I feel like that's when he's struggled the most, and like, he suffers enough, but like kind of realizing like, oh, maybe not everything I do by faith in good faith is the right choice. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that our point earlier where we were like, Marvel is not as precious about that character as they are, say, Spider-Man. I think what you're describing like perfectly illustrates that, because I don't think you would ever see a Spider-Man comic where he is like so deeply in a state of existentially questioning like every choice he has made, or at the very least, if they did that, fans might have such a like strong backlash reaction to that they would feel like we can't allow a story to go that direction, right?
Yeah, I felt like it was a very gritty and like relatable way to show someone showing accountability, you know what I mean? And realizing, not every choice I've made has been correct.
And I think I also love about that arc is the way that Matt's story runs parallel to Kingpin's story in that.
Yeah.
Where he's like practically a co-lead of that comic up until Devil's Reign, it feels like. And I think what's cool about his arc is he's similar to Matt, the way you're describing, is like he also, when he elevates himself into the world of politics and trying to be a legit player in that space, he too has this realization of all of this work that I've done to fight my way to the top of being the kingpin of crime in New York doesn't mean anything to these people who operate within these huge influential political spheres that have so much money and so much power that I'm like now at the bottom of the ladder all over again and have to fight my way back up. And that was such
times. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There were times in those earlier issues where we saw more of Kingpin where he almost had you feeling empathy for that character. You know what I mean? Like him
yeah.
at that dinner party, and I can't remember what exactly but they were
The
making him feel small.
yes, the rich
And
people. I forget what their
yeah, yeah,
names
yeah.
are.
I can't remember what they
Always.
were saying or implying or whatever. It was a long time ago, but yeah, all that leading up to the scene in the bathroom, um, you're like, oh my God, like what is this feeling I feel? You know what I mean? And
Do
on
I feel
top of
bad for
that,
Wilson Fisk?
yeah, like I'm not supposed to feel this way. But on top of that, you also have this parallel story of what was going on with Elektra and,
Mm-hmm.
her realizing as well that her own life had been made up of choices that maybe she had made, not considering the outcome for other people, you know what I mean? And
Right.
her
Yeah.
journey into being Daredevil. So yeah, that was it's just a very layered run itself.
Yeah. I think it's the one that out of all of them. And I feel like if you were to be like, what's my favorite Daredevil run? I could give you like 5 different answers for 5 very different reasons.
Yeah.
Like
What are those
I
5?
obviously love, okay, so obviously the Frank Miller run for like the obvious reasons of like the way it redefines the character. The Ann Nocenti run, which almost immediately follows the Frank Miller run, and I think is criminally underrated. And
Agree.
I love that book because it feels almost like a Vertigo book at times, where it's like very deconstructionist about superheroes and their thematic place in society, and also the way it tells these just like outlandish, over the top stories with Matt, where he's like fighting Ultron with nothing but his billy club, or he's riding a subway to hell during the Inferno event. Like stories that you think post Frank Miller they would never do again, and she manages to still have that gritty New York feel while also being over the top and fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously the Mark Waid run, I think is just like that to me was kind of the run that really made me love Daredevil. Funny enough, because I think I obviously read the Frank Miller run because I was like, well, Wizard Magazine always talks about this, so it must be good. And then I read it as a kid. But then I was kind of like, I don't know, Daredevil seems like it's always just so grim and gritty. And then Mark Waid's approach made me love the character so much that it made me go back and read everything else. And I learned to appreciate those other elements and discover things like the Innocenti run that weren't quite what I expected them to be.
Let me
And
interject
then
real
I
quick.
would
We got
go ahead.
Mike Thomas out in YouTube land because we're live on Twitch and YouTube. In YouTube, Mike Thomas says Bendis's run is outstanding, and Mike Thomas says I started reading as a kid during the Nocenti run. I just wanted to shout out our chatters out there. Sorry, continue, Brian.
So then, building on that point, I'd probably say the Brian Michael Bendis run, which I think is just like so expansive and also so important with the Marvel Knights aspect and how it really rejuvenated the company of Marvel at a time when they were literally bankrupt and going through such difficult times. And I think that character and his reinvention within Marvel Knights was so important to their recovery, or at least the way they stayed afloat until they really bounced back.
I think Marvel owes Bendis everything. I not everything, but like you take Bendis out of the equation of Marvel, and Marvel is not around today.
The last 30 years would look radically different if Bendis isn't around.
Bendis, okay. Three things that I think is huge Bendis things is Daredevil, Ultimate Spider-Man, and New Avengers.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because the Ultimate Universe kept Marvel afloat, and it brought me in. It like Ultimate Universe brought me into Marvel.
It kept Marvel afloat, and then as it was waning, it gets the Miles Morales factor, which I think we're still seeing Marvel benefit from in the form of the movies, in the form of the video games. Yeah. Like that's huge for them.
Miles did this thing where it was like you're on the freeway, right? And you're trying to figure out which lane is going faster because it goes like this, right? And like you're driving and you're like, should I change lanes? Should I change lanes? And Miles changed right at that time where this lane just stops completely and he just keeps going.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And then New Avengers, I mean, that kind of made Avengers an A-list book in a way it never fully was. Like, I think it's hard to think about this now in the world where Avengers Endgame is one of the highest grossing movies of all time, but like people didn't really care that much about the Avengers when I was a
Avengers
kid.
weren't shit. Fuck the Avengers. Like I was talking about this on Comic Talk. I was not interested in the Avengers at all. It was a B-list team. Like people people who love Marvel, it was Spider-Man and X-Men, followed by the Hulk, Fantastic Four, roughly, right? They all got cartoons. Avengers did, but it was sucky, and then later on it was good. But it was a 1-2 punch for the Avengers. And Marvel really needed it because it's Avengers being the Justice League of the Marvel Universe needs to be lifted up. It's the 1-2 punch of the Ultimates and New Avengers. And they were both going on at the same time. And Marvel needed both.
And then, speaking back to Daredevil, I think his run on Daredevil obviously comes right after the Kevin Smith run, which I think did some of the heavy lifting for this as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that imprint of Marvel Knights and that book specifically really said, no, Marvel still got a really interesting creative juice in the tank that people should be paying attention to. And I don't think we end up with the Daredevil TV show or the popularity of Daredevil now without that Bendis run to kind of say, hey, this character still has a lot more in him. It didn't peak with Frank Miller and more can be done here.
What year was the Bendis run?
I think it was very early 2000s, right?
Was it before the movie?
Seems right.
Was it before the
yes, it was before the movie. Yeah.
Okay.
It had to be because I feel like there's a character, there's a random dude named Bendis in that movie. That movie has so many people named after comic creators to the point where it's distracting.
Was it Kevin Smith's character that was named?
Kevin Smith is in it. Yeah. But at the start of the movie, there's this was crazy that they did this. At the start of the movie, there's a serial rapist whose name is Joe Quesada, who he hunts down. I'm I can't believe Quesada signed off on this.
He's yeah, this is fine.
All right.
But they put so many Easter egg names in that to the point where it's distracting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's how every street in Gotham is named after a Batman writer.
Yeah.
I found out today. I didn't know that Kevin Smith had written any Daredevil. I almost said Batman.
Red Batman.
Red Batman. Yeah, I didn't know that until literally a couple hours ago.
Yeah. It was I'm not going to ask how old you are, but I think I might be older than you. So I won't ask that question.
I feel like we're all around the same age. We're all timeless.
Yeah, look at us.
Look at us. Very kind of you. He officially took over Daredevil in 2001. But you know what it was, Maggie? He didn't write it for very long, and I don't think it's aged super well, or it has not been. It's been kind of overshadowed by all the great Daredevil stuff that came after it.
Yeah.
I feel like Kevin Smith's run was one of those, again, Wizard Magazine ones that they talked about all the time in Wizard Magazine. And they were we love this. But he also was bad at getting scripts done on time. It was famously very delayed. And then they gave him a Daredevil Bullseye miniseries that I think one issue of came out, and it's never been finished.
Oh my gosh.
You remember Wolverine Black Cat? Wasn't that a thing? Didn't he write
Spider-Man Black Cat?
Spider-Man Black Cat. Okay.
Yeah, he at least got 2 or 3 issues out of that one, I think. And then, also.
His last thing in DC ends with a cliffhanger, and it's supposed to have another miniseries, but it was Batman Is it Batman Cacophony or the Batman the Widening Gyre?
It's one of those two, yeah.
Whichever one came
I think
second.
It might be Cacophony.
Yeah. And it ends with a cliffhanger, and then, that's it. That was 15 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah. So it's one of those things where he was busy with other stuff, I guess.
He had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. But it was at that time when he did it, his popularity was much. I mean, not that he's dipped significant in popularity, but I think his brand, if you will, was so high that him doing that really lended an air of legitimacy to it. And people were like, "Holy crap, Kevin Smith's writing a comic," and that made it blow up in a pretty major way.
Yeah, and then he wrote the Green Arrow ongoing,
which is actually not bad. That stuff's pretty good, I think.
Yeah. but when we mentioned Kingpin, obviously, Kingpin being Matt's greatest villain, but then he has other villains. Some would say Bullseye's his greatest villain, but let's talk about Matt's villains. Are there ones that work? Are there ones that don't? Are there ones that don't work anymore? Are there? I mean, we could. Start
I could
with
spend the
Bullseye.
next 30 minutes. I can spend the next 30 minutes just talking about Stiltman, frankly, but I don't know how much we want to do that.
Do you like Stiltman?
I love Stiltman. I just think it's like, it's one of those things that Marvel, I feel like, didn't do the thing that DC did, where they were just like, any premise you can think of will be a villain. Kite Man,
Yeah.
Polka Dot Man, Zebra Man,
Right.
anything. And I don't feel like Marvel did that as much. You get a couple weird ones here and there. But what I love about Stiltman is I'm like, this guy should have been fighting Batman in the 60s. Like, why was this guy here? He feels so out of place sometimes. But I kind of love that silly goofiness. I think he's got a cool design. And I also, Maggie, speaking of Zdarsky's run, one of my favorite things about it was seeing the arc where he gave all these villains an opportunity to try to reform.
Yeah.
And Stiltman gets a hero moment. Like, Stiltman saves a child from a burning building. I'm like, yes, my boy, this is amazing.
Like, good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, you've earned this, Wilbur Day. So yeah, it's a character that I love. But I'll turn it over to you two to talk villains for a bit.
You mentioned the recent run where Matt is trying to reform the people on the island. And it brings up like a very interesting thing that X-Men has brought up recently, where it's like, if we just say that like tabula rasa, blank slate, what you did in the past is forgiven, as long as we adhere to what we are going forward. The mutants have been doing that because they need mutant solidarity on Krakoa, and a lot of the villains, it's shown that like a lot of the villains are just villains because they've been villains, and that like in real life, if we think about like prison recidivism and like going back to prison and essentially becoming just a worse person because of your trauma, because you've been put into prison, makes it more likely you're going to go back to prison. When if you didn't go to prison in the first place, you could have been rehabilitated from the start and not get into that cycle. When you look at villains in the Marvel universe that are essentially, they're doing the same thing over and over. If you give them a chance to be a hero or to, make up for their past without that baggage, can they reform? I thought that was a super cool part of like Matt's Island thing. And the other heroes were hating on it. They like, they're just cops. They're just being cops. And like, they did the same thing with the X-Men, where the X-Men were like, no, Sabretooth's with us. And Sabretooth ended up killing people, and then they sent Sabretooth away into the prison. But the point being is that, like, they're like, no, mutants are our business. Like, you stick to your humans, But, like, Matt tried to reform. Was Stegron there, too?
Stegron was there. That lady symbiote, who I think her name is Shriek, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She was there.
There was
Bullet.
a bunch of people there.
From the Anna Senti run was there. Fancy Dan from the Enforcers was one of them.
John Walker was one of them too, right?
No, John Walker.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
It may be one of the sickest scenes of that whole run.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
He turn off the lights?
Yeah, he turns off the lights after he's like, time to get right with God, John. And John's like, no, I'm right with God. And then he goes, if you were right with God, he wouldn't have sent the devil. And then he shuts off the lights. And I dropped the comic and did laps around my apartment because I got so hyped. I was like, let's go.
Yeah. That run had some like hard panels. Like,
yeah.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
Daredevil lends itself to moments where you're just like, oh shit. Like the Frank Miller run where the 10 dudes fight Kingpin at once just to like be his workout for the day.
Yeah.
That's a great moment.
One of my favorite parts of the Frank Miller run is when those people follow Elektra into an alleyway and she kills them all and writes "I love New York" in their blood. I remember when I read that, I was like, yes.
So good.
Yeah.
That moment's great. I love the moment when in Born Again and he finds the costume in it, and he has that whole monologue about how like he didn't know who was responsible, and it ends with him going, "It was a nice piece of work, Kingpin. You shouldn't have signed it." I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's rule.
Are Daredevil's one-liners better than Batman's one-liners?
Low key a little bit, right? Especially because I feel like a lot of them are at moments where like he's really on the ropes, or like he's a dangerous man in this moment. You don't know what's about to happen. Right?
Yeah.
Like Batman will never be backed into a corner, but Daredevil thrives in the corner. And I think that's kind of an inherent difference between the characters. Is like Batman would never, like, that's kind of the problem with Batman. I love Batman, but the infallibility of Batman. Marvel never pretends that Daredevil is infallible. They're like, no, you're going to kick him. He's going to get down. Like, and he's going to, like, thrash his way back.
Well, and that's the boxer mentality, right? Like the rope-a-dope. You let the guy hit you until he's worn out, and then you strike back because you built up your energy. Like that's 100% how Daredevil fights and how he thinks. Like that's his dad coming out in him.
That's a good point. He works best under pressure, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should talk about the bad guys, though. You're right, Dimithri. We should talk about some villains.
Yeah. I mean, are you guys a big fan of Bullseye?
I gotta be honest with you. Outside of just like what I've read in Dare, I don't really know a whole lot about Bullseye. You know what I mean? I think he's a cool character, though.
I don't support what he does, but I do think he's a good character.
Morally, he's an interesting character, I guess. Yeah.
yes. Let's be clear.
I have to be careful with that.
Well, what's funny too is like I was thinking about this going into today. I was like, Daredevil is a character who is wildly popular, and like there's so many runs of him that are like highly acclaimed. And if you really take a step back, he's got like 3 or 4 villains.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, that, or at least ones that have like made an impact in a major way that everybody's like, this is a Daredevil villain.
Yeah.
Because you got Bullseye. Sorry, go ahead,
Kingpin.
Bullseye, Elektra, Kingpin.
Yeah.
Maybe the Owl, if you're being generous.
The Owl has yet to make any impact other than the comics, right?
Right. I mean, he was kind of in the Daredevil TV show.
Leland Owlsley Senior, right? And then he dies. Did they ever show Junior?
No, but I'm waiting for the day a guy shows up with crazy hair and claws flying around to fight Charlie Cox. That's what I'm waiting for. I need it. I need more Daredevil media, and that like I need it. I think Daredevil, just those badass moments in the comics. I'm not one of those people that say like we need a live action adaptation for everything, but like Daredevil makes a really good live action adaptation. Yeah. Well, I think part of that too is that it's even with Spider-Man, you have a degree of big showcasing moments that are going to be very special effects laden, right? But Daredevil, anything that he's going to get into, it's going to be very street level. It's going to be a brawl. It's going to be a well choreographed like fight sequence. Yeah. And I think that kind of gives him a different quality that sets him apart from a lot of superhero media, with some exceptions. But yeah, like that's what you want to see from Daredevil is like a cool ninja fight where he's really showing off his skills. And that's very compelling and entertaining to watch.
Yeah. We brought up the villains. What about his super friends?
I love his relationship with Spider-Man.
How would you describe that relationship?
a bromance.
Is it?
No.
I mean, Foggy and him are what I call hetero life mates. You know?
Yeah, 100%.
You know,
I like that they, they have so much in common. My dog is like licking right by my microphone. I'm like, can you stop? But I do like that they have so much in common and they have like a respect for each other when it comes to what you have to do to protect your friends and your family and your own identity. You know what I mean? They have an understanding of each other that I think obviously not many people do.
and they both dealt with loss, a lot of loss,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just good old neighborhood boys, right?
Yeah. Yeah. New
And
York boys.
yeah, are they close to each other? I don't know where Hell's Kitchen is compared to where's
Hell's
is he
Kitchen
from
is a
Queens?
small neighborhood. Hell's Kitchen is
In
a small
Manhattan.
neighborhood in Manhattan. Yeah.
Okay.
So which is kind of the funny thing about reading old Daredevil comics, because you're like, damn, New York has changed significantly. You go to Hell's Kitchen now, it's like bougie. It's one of the really nice parts of the city. Versus like Frank Miller's interpretation, where you're like, this is a garbage pile on Earth.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like
Is
the
Spider-Man
very
from Queens?
tip of it. Spider-Man's from Queens, yeah, and Queens is like one of the outer boroughs of New York City.
Okay. Are you out in New York City?
I'm in Jersey City.
Okay.
So I can literally see like the New York skyline.
So Kamala Khan.
Yeah, I'm near Kamala Khan.
Yeah.
We're repping Jersey.
Cool.
But it would take if you were in Hell's Kitchen, it would take you a minute to get all the way out to Queens if you're taking the subway or even driving.
Okay. I just wanted to say that like I love being a Californian. I love living in California. I think it's the best state, you know? Like I'm very proud. That being said, I've always been so jealous of Marvel's relationship to New York City. I just I'm always like they're doing their thing and I'm like that would seem really cool. Like neither in DC or Marvel does LA have very much going on. Like West Coast Avengers, were they in LA? I don't know. The X-Men moved to San Francisco, which I think it was cool, but like I'm not in San Francisco. In Marvel, the Pride takes over like LA and whatever, and that shows like that's why there's no heroes there. And then DC has Coast City, but I don't know where Coast City is supposed to be. It's supposed to be somewhere in California. But like
I feel like it must be California, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's the East Coast, the coast it's on.
No, it is on the West Coast, but like the West Coast is huge, so I don't know where Coast City is. And then Star City, I think, is also on the West Coast, but I think Star City might be in like Washington State.
Well, it must be nice to have some options.
Yeah, but like
I got nothing.
What I'm there's bound to be like a Marvel thing from Kentucky. Right?
Who was the superhero for the 50 state initiative for Kentucky?
I was trying to look that up. I wrote in Google Kentucky State.
Let's find out.
I wrote Kentucky State team. I just get basketball.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're getting
I can tell you that.
I'm trying to go for Marvel. I sometimes forget that there are things other than comics.
Who are these people? All right, are we ready for this?
It's Action Pack.
Yes, that's exactly what I saw. So this is a team called the Action Pack. Maggie, I want to hear your assessment of this group as our official representative here. So one of them, now this, we're going to start with maybe the worst one. One of them is a Skrull imposter who posed as Frogman.
Okay.
How do we feel about this so far?
I mean,
I'm interested. Keep going.
That Skrull got assigned to be Frogman. Okay.
Yeah, he really drew the short straw on that one.
Yeah.
Also, what strategic value did Frogman have at the Secret Invasion that they were like, we got to get a Frogman
this guy.
in here?
I think that people would overlook Frogman, right? Like, they wouldn't think that a Skrull would be Frogman. Just like they wouldn't think that a Skrull would be that coyote that Amadeus Cho had. Remember? I don't know if you guys remember that.
All right, so there's one. Her name is Prima Donna.
Oh.
She is a former supermodel who has undefined level of super strength.
Okay.
I like that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
We have Vox. He has on his face what I can only describe as a series of neon lights.
But I think they're in sound. I think they're sound waves, right?
Okay. His abilities manifest. Okay, he has electromagnetism, and his abilities manifest as glowing orange circles.
Okay. Okay.
This is the best one, I think. Okay. Her name is Cloud9. She's wearing like a Amelia Earhart type aviator outfit.
Yeah, Cloud9 was one of the main characters in Avengers Initiative. She was one of the youngest. Yeah. She's really good with a sniper, and she can fly on a cloud.
That's sick. She also appears to be able to like manipulate gases, and that's how she flies.
Oh,
so she can make like, is it like Goku? She can like fly on a cloud.
Yeah, but I don't know whether she was ever a member of. Is she a member?
It's according to this, she is part of.
Okay, she probably did that after she
pack.
graduated. Then okay, yeah,
probably, yeah.
I like Cloud9.
Sounds
okay,
pretty great.
She is the best one. She is a really good character.
Yeah, great design. I like this a lot. All right, Maggie, how do we feel about the action pack?
Maggie should cosplay. Maggie, you should cosplay Cloud9.
Let me Google Cloud9.
It's not.
Oh,
it's not bad.
Oh my gosh! Here we go.
It actually doesn't seem like she's part of the team.
Yeah,
she was just there. She just met them at one point. She should join the team.
Oh yeah, she's not even from Kentucky. She's from Illinois.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! These people.
Boo, Illinois.
That's not even close to me.
Though.
Huh?
I said Frogman's not from Kentucky though. He's from New York. He's not Daredevil.
They had to relocate a lot of people for the 50 state initiative just to give.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen?
Checks out.
Have you guys seen Kansas's super team?
Mm-mm.
They get ripped apart by zombies in, I think, Marvel Zombies Supreme. There's a guy who's a living sunflower.
Oh.
What?
That sounds fun.
Kansas, I think, right? Kansas Marvel team. The Harvesters.
That's crazy.
Members include Pioneer, formerly Topeka, Grain Belt, Meadowlark, and Sunflower. I think a lot of them get eaten by Hyperion.
I'm looking up the New Jersey team. And at first I was excited because we apparently got a version of the Defenders, which included Nighthawk, Blazing Skull, Colossus, She-Hulk, Son of Satan. This is a dope team. And here's their history. Ready? Second paragraph. The team was disbanded for incompetence.
Why is Colossus on that team?
I don't have an answer for you.
Also, mutants weren't drafted.
I guess Colossus was.
Huh. Okay. Well, California had an actual series called The Order.
Yeah, I remember that. Wasn't that like a Matt Fraction joint?
I think so. I have the book.
I think he read that, yeah.
It's been a long time. Anyway,
they should bring that back. Anyway.
I love the 50... You mean the 50 State Initiative?
Yeah, bring that back.
I would love it. I would also love to just design some California heroes as opposed to the Order, because I thought that was easy. They were just mythology inspired. But like, what does California have to do with that? We should have gotten a big bear, because that's on our state flag.
Totally.
Come on.
Yeah.
Give us a big bear. Like, if you're doing give us Prima Donna.
Yeah, she would fit well as like a California character because she's a supermodel.
Right. So, because we're all supermodels out here. So bringing it back to Matt, his super friends. We got Spider-Man. That's a big one. It's a lot of street level stuff, right? Like street level heroes. He had
the one that
he had a stint with Black Widow.
That's true, in San Francisco.
Did you guys like that? You guys like that mashup? Like, or not mashup, match? Anyway, whatever. You guys like them?
It's fine. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not my number one like ship choice for him.
What's
by
your
any
number one
stretch of the
ship choice?
imagination.
Yeah.
Therapy.
Yeah. Well,
I
by the way,
ship Matt Murdock and a good therapist.
we're jumping around, but like, has he ever gone to actual therapy?
Not
When he
outside
was
of
in San
confessional, as
Francisco?
far as I know. Like,
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking. Like, I don't think confessional counts.
Yeah.
Speaking as a from a Catholic,
I mean,
it definitely doesn't count.
I don't think confessional counts. Confessional is not
No.
professional. You know, I don't think that. Like, I think that although, you know, people in their religions, although, you know, it helps, I guess, to talk to somebody. These aren't trained professionals. It's just kind of, you know, it's just like some
Yeah.
random guy teaching your kindergarten
Mhm.
class. Like, who is this person? They're not a teacher. You know,
Yeah.
They could be a good person. They could be great, but they're not a teacher if they're not trained. But yes, he does need a therapist. But
I think I'm trying to remember in the Mark Wade run. Maggie, you said you're currently reading the Mark Wade run?
Yeah. I'm picking at it. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
okay. I was gonna say maybe you got to this part, but I remember one of the things that Mark Wade really explored that I thought was interesting was Matt dealing with depression in like an explicit way, like he has depression.
Mhm.
And I feel like there was a bit in that where he did like go see a therapist or he sought like some form of therapeutic help in that story, but it might have been a little later in the run.
Yeah. If it does happen, I don't think I'm there yet, but which is
Yeah.
fine. But no, I agree. He could use it. Like, regardless, he could use it.
Yeah.
For sure.
There was also a good story in that run, and this might be minor spoilers, so I apologize out there for anybody
That's
who
okay.
hasn't read it yet. But his mom comes back, which was cool because like we haven't seen her since it was revealed she was the nun, or at least as far as I
Yeah.
remember. Like she's not really been in any stories, and you find out that like part of the reason that she left him and his dad was because she was dealing with really severe postpartum depression.
hmm
And there's like a really interesting story about the two of them reconciling over like what happened to her and her coming to terms with that. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Uh,
That is interesting.
yeah, I highly recommend that. Worth checking out for anyone who like hasn't read it. It was the original Sin tie-in of the series.
yeah.
We all remember the event Original Sin, I'm sure. So it's pretty easy to pick out because it's got that banner at the top. It's like a 2-part story, but it's definitely worth checking out and reading. It's really good.
Again, an
Cool.
example of something that Marvel wouldn't do to Spider-Man. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Marvel would not make Aunt May. The last time Marvel, I don't know if you guys remember, what was it called? What was that mini series called with young Aunt May, young Uncle Ben? It was called Light. It wasn't called Light.
Oh my God, you talking about Trouble?
Trouble. The last time Marvel tried to really change things up with Spider-Man's origin, Marvel made a romance comic between May, Ben, Richard, and whatever Spider-Man's mom's name is. I want to say Martha, but it's not Martha. And they made them fall in love at camp and switch partners, and then Aunt May gets pregnant with Peter and gives it to her sister to raise. So it makes Aunt May Peter's mom because of a cheating incident, and then they were like, "Oh, never mind. This is out of continuity."
And that was a Mark Miller comic, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Mark Miller attempting to write a romance comic.
Yeah, yeah. Mistakes were made. It had those like really gross photo covers
of like young underage girls like looking like they were modeling for like Forever 20, not Forever 21.
This is
Limited
why Marvel Nights needed to happen, because they were doing stuff like that as well, and they needed something to like bounce back.
Yeah.
Oh God, Trouble. I've gone so many years without thinking about that comic, and now you made me think about it again. I'm so mad at you.
I'm sorry. You just like you have to learn the right lessons from it. It isn't that like you can't shake things up. It's that like there are certain things that you're like, are you what's the purpose of doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Spider-Man's mom's name is Mary, by the way.
Mary.
Richard and Mary Parker.
That's right. Not Martha.
Not Martha.
Speaking of which, there are 3 villains in Marvel Comics that have the last name Marco, and none of them are related to each other.
Who's it? Juggernaut, Sandman, and who's the other one?
Man Mountain Marco.
Oh, right.
So two of them are Spider-Man villains alone. There's
right.
And then there's Juggernaut.
But on that subject of villains, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. We were talking about Punisher earlier, and I have never been a huge fan of Punisher like solo comics, with some exceptions. I really will defend that recent Jason Aaron run. I thought it was exceptional. But the one thing that I love is when he's an antagonist for a hero character, and I think Daredevil in particular, their dynamic together, not a friendship by any stretch of the imagination, but I think their dynamic together is one of my favorites to see in comics.
I mean, it works really well on the show. It does. By the way, all those companies, you just pay their writers and actors what they want, because we can't keep going on with this. Anyway, so, but like, and then, yeah, I mean, that part of that show was just really good. I don't know, Maggie?
1 second.
Okay.
I think that my personal favorite use of that was actually in the Garth Ennis Punisher, where there's that story that they adapted a little bit into the show, where Matt has Daredevil tied up on the roof and he's going to kill someone, and Matt's basically like trying to talk him out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that really is a great encapsulation of their relationship, because I think much as Daredevil sees Foggy as like the version of his life that he wishes he had, I think there are times where Matt can almost see Frank Castle as a cautionary tale, where if he dips too far into Daredevil, he might turn out like this guy.
Right. Punisher and Daredevil, they're a really interesting dynamic. I don't like to see it too often, because I think it's just like sometimes what happens, and my critique of Daredevil runs is sometimes it just ends up being repeating some of the stuff that a previous writer has done. You know?
Yeah.
It's just, again, with Matt like being like, who am I? Who am I?
Yeah, and I think that both of those characters have, whether they're actually right or not, but they have their own reasons for acting and dealing with situations the way that they do. And I agree with you, Dimithri. I like that dynamic, but I don't need to see it all the time.
Yeah.
Because again, I think they both have reasons for being the way that they are, and that's probably best explored separately. But when they clash, it's good. When they have those disagreements, you know, it's good. But yeah, I agree with you on that.
They clashed recently, and I loved it. The Punisher series and the Daredevil series. Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil met Jason Aaron's Punisher, and they had a big old fight that I thought was going to be like even bigger, but it actually...
I was just going to say, that's the only exception. I kind of I maybe had talked myself into believing that that was going to be the end of it. You know what I mean?
I did the exact same thing.
Yeah. So... But
it wasn't. I don't even remember what happened. Punisher comes out with a dragon.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's a splash page where Punisher has a dragon, and I'm like, how is this not like a 10-issue miniseries? Like, this feels like it should be the big crossover event for this part of the year.
Yeah.
I agree. I literally thought that's how both of them was going to end. This big confrontation between the hand and the fist and all that stuff. So I was a little disappointed in that. But also, again, like I just said, I don't necessarily need it to be. I was just looking forward to more of whatever they had going on. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was
And
crazy.
I will say on that point that I also felt that disappointment, but I also was, now that I've read to the end of the both series,
Yeah.
I do feel like I'm glad that they let them end the stories on their own terms the way they wanted to,
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than potentially trying to like force a crossover that maybe wouldn't have executed the vision they had for the ending for the characters.
Yeah, the ending of both of those series put both characters in far different places in their life
Oh my god, yeah.
than they started. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
My brain is concocting a Punisher run in my head right now that like, because the problem with Punisher right now is like obviously like real world issues, and then they're trying to like separate Punisher from that, but like Punisher needs to come back and make a statement in the comics, you know, and take his symbol back.
But that's the thing. They already tried that
With what?
Yeah.
with I can't, oh my gosh, Matthew, I can't remember who wrote it.
Was it Matthew Rosenberg?
Yes, it was Matthew Rosenberg,
When the
where he
cops-
literally he pulled the decal off the cop
Yeah,
car
but
and
that's just
said, if
one
you guys want a
panel.
hero,
or one page.
I know, but geez, you'd think that would have been enough. But I do agree with you, but like it is, you know, it's a shame how that character has kind of. I have a lot of feelings about the Punisher, but
I don't think he needs to exist, so I understand the idea of writing him off, but I also don't like the idea of letting real assholes win.
Yeah.
I think the problem is, to your point, Maggie, like you'd think that would have made the message clear, but I think that moment makes it clear that like the people who put those decals on their trucks and whatnot, they don't read comic books.
Right.
Like
yeah,
they,
no, you're absolutely right.
I think unfortunately the symbol has grown to a point where it means something beyond what the comic book character is.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like people who bomb abortion clinics for Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
know?
It's you've taken a one thing and twisted it into something totally different than what it was intended to be.
That's the closest
Well,
I'll
and-
ever get to comparing Punisher to Jesus. That's other than that, very different people.
Which I just want to clarify.
But
I mean, here's the thing. Some of them do obviously have half a clue what's going on because they were
Right.
so upset when the logo was changed, even though it was changed because his environment changed. You know what I mean?
Right.
The old one was still around. It was in like a shrine or something, but
yeah.
so they have some kind of an idea as to why, you know, how Marvel feels about it. But yeah, I don't know. I really liked the most recent Jason Aaron run. I liked how it ended. I'm interested to see what happens with the mantle of the yeah,
new
you know.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw out the pitch just in case Marvel is listening. If I had to pitch, I would pitch a conspiracy of dare I say right wing Punisher enthusiasts as like a thing of different levels, a gang, right? A domestic terrorist group, and have Punisher take down their thing one by one as he works up the ladder, and at the end, literally be on camera in front of the world, executing these guys and saying, this is why I'm doing this. This is what I stand for, not this. And if you get in my way, if you do X, Y, and Z, then that's what I stand for. I just feel like he's still a horrible, shitty killer, murderer, all that stuff.
Right.
But at the very least, he's not a white supremacist.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Right.
Right.
That's his redeeming quality. He's not a white supremacist.
The thing is, if you do one of these on the Punisher, you might as well just have me come back. But the thing with the Punisher is people miss the mark on that so bad. Like, he should be a hero to people who understand that veterans and men need mental health care and
Right.
and how we treat people when they come home from war and like PTSD and all this shit.
Yeah.
And like you should look at this character as, hey, like, I relate to the way that this man has not healed, if that makes sense.
Right.
Taking all the murder and all that stuff outside of it, but like this is an incredibly broken person who we did not help as a country, you know.
Yeah.
And like that's what I find really interesting about him, and how an entire nation of people just didn't get it, you know.
It's how the system
And
failed
what I
him.
also
The many systems that incorporate his life failed Frank Castle.
Well, and what kind of, which I think was kind of audacious on the part of the Jason Aaron story, is that it's not only that the system failed him, but that like he showed signs. The way Jason Aaron, for anybody who's listening to this or watching this who hasn't read it, like part of the story is that Frank Castle was showing very violent tendencies from a young age before he went to the war.
Yeah.
And I think what's also pretty damning in the story is the idea that it wasn't just that no one helped him when he came back, it's that the military industrial complex saw something they could use in him when these were qualities that needed to be, worked out of his system. And rather than giving him the help he needed from a young age, they said, let's take these horrible qualities and exploit them for our own ends. And then once we're done with him, we'll just leave him in society with no one to give him the tools he needs to cope with what he's going through.
Yeah. It's sad because it should be a symbol of, the people in real life who bring up that, like, male suicide's on the rise, right? Like that men have problems too. But those people are also fighting when they say men have problems too. They're trying to be like, women shouldn't complain.
Yeah.
Men have problems too. Not that we should all complain because we all have these issues, different issues, but we all have issues. We are all allowed, we should all be allowed that healing. It's that women shut up, men's suicide's on the rise.
It feels like it's never brought up unless it's... Oh, I'm sorry, Maggie, go ahead.
No, it's okay. You can interrupt me. It's fine.
No,
During that.
No, say your piece.
It's, it's a woman's fault, essentially, when it comes to that. Because, like, I don't know what you guys were talking... I was talking to my son just a second ago, but it goes back to accountability and, like, what can I do for myself or how can I help myself instead of whose fault is this?
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Man, Punisher. Yeah. It's so weird. Like, Daredevil has not persisted in the pop culture, like in the mainstream eye as like Punisher has.
Right.
It's so
But
weird.
what I think is also interesting about their dynamic is that when they do interact, I also feel like Matt tries to help Daredevil, or Matt tries to help Frank, but I think there's the reversal happening as well, where Frank is almost like Matt's personal serpent in the garden, to use a religious metaphor. That, like, I think Frank sees Matt as the one superhero who could maybe dip to his side. And he's often kind of like, I'm right when I do this. And I know you also want to be doing this. So get on board and get out of my way.
I see it that way. But I also see it as in a way of Frank, without showing weakness, pleading his case to the lawyer, right? He's like, please understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. There's X, Y, and Z. There are all these reasons why I'm doing what you're doing. You're coming at me, but please just listen to me. Like, the closest Punisher gets to, like, crying, right? Is him being like, Matt, just, Yeah. And he goes about it the whole wrong way. Like, maybe Frank needs to cry. Crying helps. Like, we all need a good cry, Like,
let's revisit the therapy conversation.
Right. So Matt does need a therapist also, but Punisher needs a whole team. Like, there was an ongoing thing in Avengers Initiative where Doc Samson was a therapist, and then he was helping. There's a character named Trauma, I think, from the Avengers Initiative, and he was helping Trauma, and then Trauma becomes a therapist because Trauma turns into what you fear. Like, he's a good guy, but I think he turns into like what you fear, and he helps, and then he like learns and he helps you cope. And so like a lot of these heroes need therapy.
I wonder if his first session with this guy was like, so your name is literally Trauma. Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
I think it's because his name is
We need to start there.
Terrence.
Yeah.
Terrence Ward has the ability to transform into whatever people close to him are afraid of. So he's the boggart in Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, you saying that, I just remembered that part of the Zdarsky run is that the ninja restorative practice clinic that he runs has mandatory sessions with Doc Samson.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
forgot all about that.
is Doc Samson? Oh, Doc Samson's in the Chip Zdarsky run?
yeah, at the very end,
Yeah.
because he's still a green Sasquatch after the
Okay.
events of Immortal Hulk.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's like giving all the villains therapy as well.
Mhm.
So I imagine Matt was probably talking to him too at that time. As
That
part of
means a
all that.
lot. Like, I don't know. Like to me as a person, that like means a lot. I don't
Yeah.
know, you know?
Well, they've been doing. I feel like there's been a very interesting shift in superhero storytelling, where they are exploring these ideas more of the idea, like concept of prison reform and whether or not villains should just be thrown in jail or if they should be given the chance to go through like restorative practice. And even in the most recent, speaking of Doc Samson's been very busy lately in the Marvel Universe because Miles started seeing him in this past week's Miles Morales
I didn't
Spider-Man
read this
comic
last.
too.
I need to read it, but okay,
It's
that's
good. It is really good. Yeah,
because Miles has been going through some shit. Like Miles has been dealing with
Yeah.
his depression and whatnot, and like his trauma, and like you're right. There has been a recent influx. I think as mainstream culture has been a little bit more accepting of therapy, which there's no reason why you shouldn't. People need therapy. Everybody needs therapy. Everybody would benefit from talking to somebody outside themselves while letting their guard down a little bit, right? But also this idea that like you don't always have to solve a problem with punches is like starting to become a thing, right? Steven Universe. It's not Marvel, but Steven Universe focuses a lot on like, sure, we could fight, we can use our powers, but we could also talk. Have we tried talking as an option? I feel like that's a thing in comics now. Like they're kind of exploring a little bit more of that.
100%.
I think I'm sorry. I think it makes for more compelling storytelling, honestly. In some way, you know, sometimes you need to just blow some shit up or whatever, but
yeah, that Miles comic does end with showing up and his daughter. They're like, "We're gonna kill some vampires." Like, yeah,
there you go.
There's room for both.
I mean, I also like the idea of like vampires being talked to and the vampires being like, okay. I think Moon Knight has been dealing with vampires, and then Blade deals with vampires, but you know, Mike Murdock.
Go on.
So Mike originally was an alternate identity that Matt used to pretend to be his own brother that's fake, that was made up. And then later, his fake brother gets wished into existence and becomes his own literal person with a soul, who then dies in Chip Zdarsky's run. It's so sad. And then people think that Mike is Matt and that Matt is dead.
Right.
It's this whole thing, but like, that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about Mike?
I was really not expecting us to be talking about Mike Murdock at any point today. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Me neither. Yeah, me neither. I didn't come prepared for Mike.
I wouldn't have thought about it before Chip Zdarsky. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of the thing about the Chip Zdarsky run that I also love, which is like he really zigs when you think he's gonna zag in a lot of moments in that run. There's a lot of unexpected directions and turns, and one of those is let's make Mike Murdock a real person and give him a very tragic story arc.
He made me care.
yeah.
Man, Chip.
Job.
Good writers stick with you. They matter, right? Like they affect you. They like but like Chip had a good run. That being said, Daredevil #1 came out with Saladin Ahmed, who I met at C2E2 in Chicago, and he agreed, like, oh, he wants to do an interview, but I had to hit him up. But now I think then it got like announced that he was going to do Daredevil, and I was like, I cannot reach this guy. So maybe one day I'll get the interview with him. How'd you guys feel about the Daredevil, the first issue? Because it picks up right
Maggie,
where Zdarsky's run ends. So right,
Maggie, you should go first with this because you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
I feel like you should go first because I don't want to know. I want to know if I'm judging it too harshly.
Well, my thought is it's hard sometimes with first issues where you can tell there's like a bigger story being planned.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because this is the thing about comics that I've tried to adopt more of a mentality of, where I'm like, I want to, as the kids would say, let them cook and see what happens and how it plays out before I really make a firm judgment on something. Because
Yeah.
I will say, I love the idea of like Matt losing his identity, like losing his memories a little bit, playing this role as a priest, like helping the community, like this new little supporting cast that got introduced of the other priests and the kids in this, essentially at-risk home that's potentially going to be closed down by the larger diocese. Like all those dramatic elements I thought were really interesting. I think the one thing that I'm a little hesitant about is the fact that, spoilers, I guess, for this first issue, it pretty much ends with Matt putting on the Daredevil costume again. And there was a part of me that was like, man, I really could have read like a whole arc of just Matt in this new life without becoming Daredevil just yet. And it's one of those things where I'm like, am I being too judgmental? Because on the one hand, we all know what's going to happen eventually. So is it like Saladin Ahmed saying like, I don't see the point in dragging this out, and maybe it will end up paying off as the story continues, and I'll be like, you know what? Making this choice was the right one. Or will I ultimately feel like 50 years too quickly? I don't know, Maggie, if you have similar feelings or there's something else that you feel about it.
I do feel very similar. My thought process was when I finished reading it, I expected honestly less from the first issue. I feel like there was too much happening.
Sure.
And I agree with you. I told someone else, like right after I read it, I feel like that first issue could have been spread out in like a 6-issue arc.
Yeah.
You know, I also feel like the way, because I know that Zdarsky and Ahmed had a conversation, when it was kind of announced that who was going to take over the run and all that stuff. And they had a conversation about how he was going to end it and where the new story should go. I feel like Chip kind of left it open to, you could go this way, you could go this way, I would have loved to seen, and I know that it's a Daredevil story, but I would have loved to seen Elektra kind of carry and be the heavy as Daredevil for a lot longer and kind of keep tabs on Matt while he's doing this thing with the church. You know what I mean? Because I feel like it kind of, and again, I'm with you, like I'm going to keep reading it. Like I'm not, but in my head, it kind of feels like it's undermined all the work she did to be, to be where she's at now. Yeah, also a little bit kind of going back to like Matt's struggle with his faith in the earlier run, in the Zdarsky run, to just go right back and then like really lean into it feels a little off for me personally. But we'll see how it goes. It was a big issue.
Yeah, it was. I didn't think about it until you said it, but yeah, you're totally right. You probably could have spread that out into like a 4 or 5 part story, like as an opening arc, and then have that ending be like the end of the first arc.
Yeah, I agree. I would have loved to have seen, even though I don't really like that he's just leaning into like being a priest now, but like I would have liked to see that flesh out a little bit more.
And I think the him being a priest would have maybe worked a little bit better if the amnesia felt more complete. You know what I mean? Where it's like he's like doesn't even remember being Daredevil, period. Right? So like if he becomes a priest at that point, it's like, okay, I can understand the journey there, because then it's like if those memories come back, then we rebuild that crisis of faith and like him grappling with like, oh, I've now created this whole life where people have this expectation for me as this person, but that doesn't fit with this journey I've gone on. Like the fact that the amnesia seems to be like dissipating so quickly, I was kind of like, I'm curious to see where this is gonna go.
Yeah. Like I know that there's some time that has passed. I think it's over like 6 months or something. But I feel a little robbed of the build up to now, if that makes sense.
I agree.
So, but
I can
all
see
that being said, I'm gonna be there whenever the next issue. I'm like, I'm gonna buy number 2. I'm gonna buy the variants. Like, so like I say all that just as someone who so intensely loved the run that came before it.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why I feel like I want to see how this plays out before I judge it, because there's enough stuff there that I really liked that if that stuff is executed well, I'll get over the like disappointment that I feel a little bit about it. But I also think the art is really great. The design of that demon.
Oh, I forgot about
full
that
body demon, but like it's still
head.
Elektra's body.
But
that was like so weird and messed up. I was like, this rocks.
The demon head sits on her body, but his demon
so
body
like she's
is
a puppet that's like hanging out of his mouth.
So like it's like MODOK, right? In a way, like it's the demon head, and then Elektra's body hangs from his head.
Yeah,
and then
that was creepy.
That was actually,
but again,
and then he exercises it.
Yeah. I was like, okay, if this arc is going to be Daredevil's fighting literal demons, I think I might be on board with this. That kind of kicks ass.
Yeah, that was wild. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, so the way I see it is probably Marvel editorial was probably like, look, we can't have another Elektra as Daredevil book for some reason, for whatever reason, right? They're like, we need Matt Murdock in the suit. I'm sure there's a Marvel editorial that's like, we need to bring back the original characters to take back the original suits, because Steve Rogers is getting Captain America back, like his own solo. Sam has moved backwards. Tony is back to being Iron Man. Thor is the Immortal Thor. Bruce Banner is the Hulk, right? Like the classic Avengers team, or like the MCU Avengers team, is now the Avengers, but it's the classic people like Scarlet Witch, Vision, right? Like Hawkeye, not Kate Bishop, but it's, there's probably a Marvel push to like put the original people back in their masks.
It feels like Marvel is doing what DC was doing in the 2010s, where they're like, legacies,
New
push
52?
them aside, erase a lot of it. Yeah. And it's like,
52.
hey guys, I don't know if you noticed, but DC realized that was a mistake, and now they're undoing all of that. So I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel about some of these choices, but I have a
theory. I have a theory that Ultimate Marvel is coming back, and then
it is, right? Like, isn't Jonathan Hickman writing an Ultimates book?
I mean,
like a full-blown imprint.
As an imprint.
Yeah,
I think that they're gonna, the Ultimate Comics is the most successful imprint that comics have ever done.
Yeah, I would have a hard time. I think that or Vertigo.
Vertigo. I think Vertigo artistically, but Ultimate's mainstream wise, like getting people into mainstream comics through a non.
I feel like we could debate about that for a whole other hour.
That's that's true.
Because we have to get into the Sandman of it all, and that's like such a huge gateway for people.
Right.
That got so many people into comics.
Yeah.
But I think if we're talking within the last 10 years, then it's definitely Ultimates.
Ultimates didn't exist
how long?
10 years.
Oh God!
It was 2000. It was the year 2000.
I'm so old.
Again, Ultimate Comics got me into reading monthly comics.
Me too, but I was like, I was in middle school 10 years ago, right? I'm like, no, I'm 34. What am I saying? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I would, by just a side note, back when I was reading Ultimate Comics, I would never have thought I'd be here with you guys talking about comics as an adult with people who love it. So thank you so much for that. Something I just wanted to bring up. When you pair Matt with Luke Cage, with Jessica Jones, with Iron Fist, sure, they did it with the Defenders miniseries, but they also did it with like the comics a little bit. My big problem with the Defenders show, the Netflix show, is that they didn't adhere to what's called like the 4 temperaments. And the 4 temperaments are essentially the Ninja Turtles. Like the Ninja Turtles and the Hogwarts houses to an extent, like, are the 4 temperaments. And so if you're making a 4-person team, you stick to those 4 temperaments so that everybody is distinctly different. I think what it breaks down to is like 2 extroverts, 2 introverts, but they're extroverts and introverts in different ways. There's like a square, right? But essentially, who is Matt compared to the Ninja Turtles? Which is funny given the history of Ninja Turtles and Daredevil. I get that, you know? But like, who in those 4, like, who is who? Because, okay, so my belief is that in the Defenders Netflix show, they should have billed Iron Fist as the Mikey. It would have been a better show.
Yeah, 100%.
If Iron Fist was Michelangelo, essentially.
That's kind of what he is in that one Spider-Man cartoon, right? He's kind of like,
I think so,
a bit of a surfer bro.
Yeah.
There's that like kids that was from like,
yeah,
I think it was the Ultimate Spider-Man.
And that's
he's kind of like, whoa. He's voiced by Beast Boy in that cartoon to give you an idea of their characterization of him.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Maggie, do you have a thought on this? I'm thinking about it as I look at a picture of the Ninja Turtles above my desk.
like who's okay?
I am
who's Donatello?
also thinking about it.
Who's Donatello in that foursome?
Well, I think the problem is that none of them fit those groups well enough, right? That like
Right.
you couldn't necessarily say. But yeah, I do agree. Iron Fist should have been the Mikey. Jessica Jones is the Raphael.
Is she? Is Matt?
Yeah, she has to be.
Okay, so then is Matt Donatello? Because Luke would be Leo, right? Like
the problem is the 4 of them, the way they're characterized, are all like Donatellos with like Raphael rising, or they're just like, or
Leo.
I mean,
she's
like primarily a Raphael.
Like,
oh no, I said Donatello. I meant Leo. Yes, they're Leos with Raphael's rising.
Right.
Except for Jessica Jones, who I think is more Raphael because justifiably an angry person. Right. But yeah, that is the issue, right? Is that they're all kind of samey in some ways, and they don't have distinct enough things to be a good team. But I feel like, I guess Daredevil's probably the most like Leo, right?
That's kind of what I was thinking, but I don't know.
But I think he'd get along with Mikey because they have similar weapons. It's just a right? Yeah. Like he doesn't have nunchucks, but they do have the things attached to them.
Yeah. And Elektra would chill with Raphael.
Oh yeah,
100%.
They would 100%. Yeah. 100%. Totally.
I just wanted to bring that up. Just something to think about.
It is crazy that we got a Batman Ninja Turtles crossover before we got a Daredevil Ninja Turtles crossover, right?
Does Marvel do crossovers with other companies? Like
not as much as they used to.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Marvel Fortnite is the only thing that I can think of.
Right. And that only came after DC Fortnite was crazy popular.
Batman Fortnite was really good.
Yeah.
Like that's I don't know if you guys read it, but like it did not need to you didn't read it?
I did not know.
It did not need to be good. It is a legitimately good Batman book.
Uh-huh.
It's so
Did
wild.
Batman do any of the Fortnite dances in it?
No.
Did Batman
don't
floss?
They don't make it hokey.
Okay.
No. But they are like in the world. So like I bought them for my son because he was really into like getting the codes.
Yeah.
But I never read it. But like they're in the world, right? Like they're in the Fortnite world.
Well, Fortnite is a like nexus of all realities.
Okay.
Like it's its own thing. And that's why you can have Sarah Connor and Terminator and Predator and anyone from any existence come in. But they do a cool thing where they lose memories, right? So they could have characters come in and actually like be a part of it and then leave and not remember. But Batman Fortnite, part of the plot of Batman Fortnite is that it's like Memento. Batman keeps losing his memory every time the game resets, and thus has to write down clues for himself.
Okay. he's in a Live Die Repeat. He's in
Yes.
a Edge of Tomorrow scenario.
with
Interesting.
Catwoman, who he doesn't remember, but he feels he feels that like history. It's really good.
I'm actually mad at you that you've kind of sold me on the DC Fortnite crossover.
It's not DC Fortnite, it's Batman Fortnite, because there is a
Batman Fortnite.
There is a Batman Who Laughs thing later. Don't read that one.
Batman Who Laughs in it, I probably won't read.
No. So I'm just saying that, like, yeah, the Daredevil probably wouldn't cross over with Ninja Turtles because Marvel doesn't tend to do those crossovers like that. At least
the only ones they do now are like companies they own. Because I was like, wait, they're going to do a Wolverine Predator, and I was like, oh right, because Disney owns Fox now, so they're like, we have this here.
I'm very interested in that. I don't know how they're going to do it.
That was the beautiful thing about a lot of those crossovers is they were just like, don't worry about it, they're just going to fight.
Like Archie
you
and
don't
Punisher.
Have to think about it too much. Yeah, like Archie and Punisher. Have you ever read the like first Marvel DC crossover, like the Spider-Man Superman one?
I have.
The way it's written, correct me if I'm wrong, Dimithri, in my memory, it's just written like they've always lived in the same place.
Yeah.
Like they make no attempt to be like a dimensional portal opens.
No,
they're just like,
it's just
hey, it's Superman. I know this guy.
Yeah. There have been 4 DC Marvel crossovers, like distinctly. There's that one from the 70s. Then there's DC versus Marvel in the 90s.
Also that Batman versus Hulk one that they did.
So Batman versus Hulk and Superman versus Spider-Man were in the same thing.
Yeah.
Same as
in that
Titans,
decade, yeah.
Teen Titans, X-Men. So it was that. Yeah. It was...
That one rips.
DC versus Marvel. But then also, it wasn't DC versus... Like, during the 90s, there was also the one where Batman and Captain America team up against Joker and the Red Skull.
So
that's another one.
Yes.
That's separate than DC versus Marvel.
They did a lot of them for a lifetime and then just stopped in the 2000s.
And then
the 90s were chock full of them. Yeah. And then there was Amalgam.
Right. But that ties in with DC versus Marvel.
Yeah, I guess so.
It was that thing.
It's still like JLA Avengers was the last time they did, and that was so long ago.
And JLA Avengers
was like 10 years ago.
Decades in the making. JLA Avengers is probably like more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, it definitely is at this point, and it rips. But yeah,
2003,
Marvel.
Brian.
Jesus Christ.
20 years ago, Brian.
20 years ago. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait for
Disney
10 years ago. Buys Paramount, and then Daredevil will hang out with the Ninja Turtles.
Okay. Yeah.
The rate things are going.
Before we get going, if you had to recommend, how I like to treat it as this: if you had to recommend just one book for one person who is interested but maybe isn't as like knowledgeable about Daredevil, what would you recommend? So like freshman, think about like a freshman, then like like a sophomore level Daredevil book, and then like a senior level Daredevil book. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Maybe it builds upon itself. I don't know, but like,
yeah.
If you're
Maggie,
if your friend was like, I don't know anything about Daredevil. I've seen some stuff. Maybe I've watched the show, whatever. But like, what's the first one to start off with?
Maggie,
I
do you have a thought on this?
I do have thoughts. I would say I think that the Frank Miller run is kind of required reading to get to know the character that we have right now. I think that, I would tell anyone to just start with Frank Miller and kind of go from there. Like Brian was saying earlier, Ando Senti, that came pretty much right after that, would be like my next level. And then, I mean, I want everyone to read Chip Zdarsky's, but I don't think anybody should start with that without reading previous runs. You know what I mean? You will not have any understanding or appreciation for the work that other people have done for the character. So those would be like my 3 kind of
what was your base level? End. Frank Miller? Frank Miller's one?
Frank Miller, then go into like Ando Senti, and then I definitely say Zdarsky. There's not a bad run. That's the thing.
Right. But are there more
It's all pretty great.
user friendly or like, you know, like
Yeah,
new
I
reader
think
friendly runs?
the those three for me, I think, are like the big defining. As far as I know, like I haven't finished the Wade run. You know what I mean? So I can't. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's incredibly recommended by all, but for me, if I had to just give someone books, that would be what I would give them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you, especially about Frank Miller, because I feel like there are few runs in comics that like so radically redefine a character that everything else is informed by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even something like the Mark Waid run is based on being the inversion of that, right?
Yeah.
Where it is a more optimistic, like throwback Silver Age, but it's being done specifically to distance itself
Yeah.
from Frank Miller in some ways. Not because they think it's bad, but just to like take a tone shift. And
Yeah.
I think you don't and what's tricky, the trick of that run is, you know, we talked about there are those very heavy topics about depression and like postpartum syndrome. Like what's tricky about it is externally it seems like it's groovy Daredevil. He's like zipping around having fun, and then what you come to realize is like, oh, a lot of this is an act. A lot of this is a front that Matt is putting on to hide this internal pain that he's coping with from all the terrible things that have happened in the runs prior to this moment.
Yeah.
So those moments will hit harder if you have that prior knowledge of what came before.
Yeah.
I would say that Frank Miller is definitely one of the best places to start, and then do Innocenti. I mean, really, you could pretty much just go in order. But I would
Yeah.
also say for somebody who is maybe coming to this as like a DC only fan, the Mark Waid run is like kind of an interesting place to start, because I think it kind of, I don't want to say it feels like a DC book, but like it has sort of, I mean, it's Mark Waid, right? Like it has elements that you find in like classic DC comics. And I think it would be a good transitional run if you're just a DC Comics person to read that and kind of get an idea of, oh, this is the Marvel universe, and here are the things that make it unique and stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny. People complain often about that it's challenging to get in the comics because there are so many things. But I feel like Daredevil, I think part of the reason he's stayed so popular is because he just has the one book that you can have a clear starting point that you can read and just kind of go forward and get
Yeah.
the best stories about that character.
Yeah. I would argue that you don't need to read Frank Miller because all other adaptations have taken from it. So that, like, you know, okay, we can kind of move on past that. If you've seen the Netflix Daredevil show, maybe you can go from that into Bendis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if that's like your vibe. But also, I'm trying to remember how Chip Zdarsky's run starts.
It's immediately after the Charles Soule run.
Right, but what's the new status quo? There's that new cop guy.
Yeah, and it's kind of building on him being a district attorney, right, from the Charles Soule run, or being involved with the district attorney's office, being a public defender.
I think so. Yeah, I'm like rewinding my brain.
But that even like doesn't last super long, because that's kind of just like tying up loose ends to then transition into what I almost don't want to say what happens because it's such a shocker.
Yeah.
But like it sets up that whole story.
I would argue if you really wanted to keep it clean and concise and just like one thing, if you've seen the Netflix show and you can't wait for like, oh, you know, the new one that's gonna come out, you could technically hop into Chip Zdarsky's thing. You don't meet any new characters.
I wouldn't argue too much against that. No, not really. I mean, eventually you'll meet like Kingpin and Typhoid Mary.
Typhoid Mary might be the only person, because Typhoid Mary, quote unquote, is in Iron Fist season 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I thought it was a cool adaptation of her, but it's not the same as the comics.
I don't know. If she's not drawn by John Romita Jr. and her hair looks gigantic, I don't want it.
But she is.
That's my favorite version of that character.
She is Alice Eve, and she's drawn by God. So.
Okay. If you say so. I think, I think that though an underrated aspect though of the Miller Daredevil is that just like the art's so good. Like, I think
Yeah.
a lot of, if you're a young person and you mostly know like modern Frank Miller, which we could have a whole discussion about that stuff, but like you can look at those comics and really get an understanding of like, this is why this guy was the guy at this time,
Yeah.
like what made him so distinct. And you also get amazing Klaus Janson art in that arc too with Born Again, who's like equally fantastic. So yeah, I think it's good to read to get a better perspective on the comics history of it all, and really see the transitions that were being made in the 80s from, you know, Silver Age comics to Bronze Age and more contemporary stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny how media reflects the climate of the time, right?
Yes.
Like certain storylines and whatnot, like Lex Luthor becoming president was very interesting at that time. Because I think that was,
well, even Lex Luthor, a businessman, was to reflect like the 80s stock market booms and that idea of the
Trump,
Wall Street
right?
tycoon.
Like
I mean, yeah, that's who he really is.
People were comparing him to him back then, and his book, his like memoir book, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, very interesting how. But here's what I think it's like. I feel
but Dimithri, wait, comics only just got political. They were never political when we were young. I don't know what you're talking
That's what
about.
I heard.
They never had themes.
If only people had better reading comprehension, we could share better ideas. I think. I mean, that's, you know.
No, 100%.
But also that, like, it's weird how like society downplayed Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just linking things. I think downplaying Superman in pop culture led to the rise of a Lex Luthor ish, a Penguin, you know, whatever.
I was gonna say it's very generous to call
it's
that
very. I mean, it's generous to call him Penguin too, because Penguin's a very smart guy, you know. But the point being is that, like, I think that if we idolize Superman as a culture, as much as we idolize Punisher, like,
or even Daredevil for that matter,
right? We would be sadder if we idolized Daredevil. We'd just all be like, oh. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if you guys have any closing thoughts about why you love Daredevil. In fact, if you guys want to just like have a little monologue on why you love Daredevil, I've been doing that on certain episodes, like for Star Trek and whatnot. Like, why you love Daredevil, what brought you to Daredevil. Just as we close up this episode, you can have your uninterrupted time just to get those thoughts out there. What Daredevil means to you.
Maggie, do you want to do your 2-page monologue that your 2-hour monologue that you discussed?
We've covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot.
I will put it together in a clip for TikTok. So,
okay.
You know, and I can edit it also. So, you know, whatever. The point being is, this is your time to.
I'll keep my thoughts. I'll keep my thoughts brief because I want to hear Maggie, and I'll just say I think what makes him special is that lack of concern from the larger like corporate editorial overlords, and because of that, it has given so many great writers and artists the room to tell really interesting stories with that character. And there are certainly, you know, great superhero comic stories throughout the history of the medium. But I think Daredevil is special because it has given space to a lot of very artistically gifted people to just tell an incredible story. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
I like it. I love Daredevil because I agree with Brian. I think that he's been consistently well written, and I think the exploration of some of the themes of his stories are more relatable to like a common person. He's just a layered guy. It's just a complicated dude, and I like that about him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't go too far into it.
Yeah. I love Daredevil because I think he hurts in very similar ways that real people hurt. But he doesn't, for the most part, close himself off to friendship. Like, this man has friends, right? He has a very close friendship with Foggy Nelson and with, other heroes as well. He doesn't close himself off to friendship, true, vulnerability. He's not afraid to love, like actually love, not selfishly love, but he's not afraid to actually love. He's not afraid to call himself out. Maybe he calls himself out a little bit too much with his guilt and with his shame. I think, although he is kind of a moody and depressing character at times, it is something to aspire to in a way. Knowing that, like, just like Daredevil isn't maybe Marvel's most popular character or Marvel's favorite, character, maybe we as human beings aren't the universe's favorite character, but we're doing the best with what we got. And so I think there are lessons to learn from Daredevil that, maybe can't be learned from baby boy Spidey, I don't know. I like Daredevil. I'm glad we all do.
Well said.
That was good.
Well said.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was very good. I was trying to be quiet for your clip for TikTok, but that was very good.
Thanks.
A clean edit point.
Yeah.
Either way, I can edit it. We're all on different audio tracks, so I can always.
Fair enough. Fair
if you just outright laugh during my monologue, you're, ha! What? I want to thank you guys so much for coming on this episode, talking to me about Daredevil. I'm so glad I had you both specifically for this episode, because you guys know so much, you add so much. Like I said before, back in the 2000s, when I was reading Marvel.comics on Marvel.com, reading comics for free, and teaching some of my friends about X-Men and whatnot, but like they weren't reading comics like I was, or into it in that same way. I never thought, like 23 years later, that like I'd be here making friends in other states, talking about things on a weekly basis, about the things that I love, and like sharing this love with others. So thank you so much for being on this show with me here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a blast.
It is.
Always a good time.
It is.
Yeah.
Before we get going, Maggie, where can people find you online? What do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
Oh man. I'm coming off a big summer of toy shows for Toy Vomit, so we're settling in.
Yeah.
Okay, for the fall. But you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. I'm not on Twitter anymore. Everything Vegan Super Kick. If you look up Vegan Super Kick, I'm on there. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Definitely worth following for anyone out there watching and or listening.
Thanks.
Brian, where can people find you online? What do you got coming up?
You can find me on TikTok at Captain Comic Rex, like recommendations, not like the dinosaur. And actually, I have a TikTok that I'll be posting next week about Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil and kind of the themes that I thought were interesting now it's reached its end. So if you enjoyed this conversation today, you can go check that out. As always, support your local public schools, go to those school board meetings, go to your meetings for the libraries. I've been saying this for, I feel like, a year now, and it's actually depressing me. I have to keep saying this, but like fascists are trying to ban books, specifically graphic novels and manga from the classrooms and libraries. And these people don't know what they're talking about. So make sure you go there and stand up for those books and the right for kids to get the opportunity to read those books that we all deserve. So, and I will also say that, these two individuals, Maggie and Dimithri, that I'm on this call with, are two of my favorite people on TikTok. And sometimes when you get on the comic side of stuff, you find some people you're like, oh boy, I don't want to listen to this person talk. And these two are an oasis in a desert of bad opinions that I sometimes encounter. So I'm always happy to see them across my feed. And if you don't follow them, you should.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys are great. You guys are positive, and you build upon things. And I think like building each other up and building the comic community up is like super important. And like some people like to tear things down because it gets more views, tearing things down. It's fun to see like a building demolished, right? But like it's more worthwhile and more fulfilling to build a building, And so
Hell yeah.
100%.
that's kind of what we do here, and that's the type of people that I like to bring on the show. And when you guys stop being those positive, awesome people, then we'll have a talk. And maybe we won't go further than that. But
you'll show up to our house dressed as Daredevil and be like, "We need to talk."
Continue being awesome. Continue being builders as opposed to demolishers.
Oh yeah.
Thank you guys so much. For anyone out there watching, you are watching us live on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show. If you're listening to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, I think, went down recently, so no more Stitcher. But we are also on social media platforms, pretty much anything, at The Keeg Show. TikTok and Instagram are our two biggest ones, at The Keeg Show. But we're also on Facebook, which has been weirdly picking up recently because I've been posting reels to Facebook, and I get random people, including just a comment that I wanted to read out that I will do a video on, that I took a snapshot. The comment that somebody wrote on Facebook was, "These comics will never ever be worth what they cost. The drawings are awful. These will never be worth what the first Incredible Hulk or the first Superman comics are." That was from Eric Gallion out there on Facebook. I don't know who you are, but
he's an appraiser.
Your opinion is your own, and thank you so much for, I guess, commenting on that. Nothing will ever be what it was like when we were kids, and that's okay, Either way, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/The Keeg Show. Find a subscription tier that works for you if you'd like to give back to the show. We got some big moves coming up, some things that I'm trying to work on, and then the strikes are happening right now, so definitely do what you can to support the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. We stand in solidarity with them and what they are fighting for, which is very important, especially to the future. That's pretty much it. That's it. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Brian, so much for coming on. Thank you to the people out there for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Dimithri Perera, and this has been the Keeg Talks Daredevil. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Super strong or super fast. Gotta beat